Hey friends, I'm Ash.
I'm Elle.
We are Lovey Cosplay.
This is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say. We are coming up on the new year of 2025, which means we are also coming up on our 100th episode. Actually, as this airs, it will already be 2025. So
Happy New Year!
We are here in our new year. So just a reminder, we are continuing with Season 5. So we are not starting Season 6 due to our massive break. Season 5 will be continuing into 2025. We decided that we wanted to share a countdown of some of our favorite moments from our Shenanigans Cosplayers Say catalog. And we have broken this down into, I believe it's our top 10.
Yep.
So our top 10 favorite episodes. Well, and actually, it's really your top 10 favorite episodes because Ash went in and looked at the catalog and using our analytics, figured out what our most popular episodes were. I wasn't surprised, were you?
No, not really.
Like, I really wasn't surprised at all by which ones were in the top 10.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
Yep. And this does not include just downloads. So this is more than just downloads whenever we were counting these out. So we pulled some other social analytics and other responses from you guys, like emails, DMs, questions, your requests. So a little bit of everything. So let's get into it and take a trip down memory lane with everybody here. So coming up into our number 10 slot is an episode which I fondly refer to as the honorable mention of the group, and that is RESPECT. Here, you joined us for a reflection on our experiences working for conventions, both the good and the difficult. We discussed the guest hierarchy, why conventions may treat artists poorly, what exposure really means, and what conventions can do to show their talent a little respect.
For anyone who's not aware of what exposure is, first of all, bless you.
You are very lucky if you don't know and have not had this word thrown at you.
Yes, but the idea behind paying an exposure is that we don't want to pay you. But by doing our job for free, then maybe somebody will see you and your work that you've done. And maybe that person might hire you and possibly pay you in the future. Maybe.
It's so absurd when you write it out.
Right.
Because it doesn't
that's
work.
essentially what an exposure is. And there's just too many variables in there.
Well,
and first of all, what exposure?
Right.
Let's be honest.
Well, because unless it's a massive convention, you are not getting any exposure.
But even then, like, cons don't do program books
No.
anymore. Most of their apps and program books don't give hardly any information on the majority of the people that are doing any type of work whatsoever for the con. The one time we were supposed to be put in a program book, they put somebody else's picture next to our names. A lot of them won't announce you on social media. If they do, it's super hit or miss on whether or not they're going to tag your socials. That totally depends on how, like, skilled their marketing manager is. And for those of you who don't know, we've talked about this, I believe, in judging episodes before. Judging 1000% will not make you cosplay famous. The only people you're exposed to are staff and contestants. And other than that itty bitty tiny bit you're on stage during the awards ceremony as judges, the contest is not about you. It's about the competitors. So if you're wanting to get quote-unquote exposure, you're better off just walking around the con.
So it should be no surprise that our most requested educational content, both inside and out of conventions, lies in the realm of mental health. This was definitely not a surprise to me. I would say that this is typically why people take interest in our podcast. And these topics have also led to some of our most thoroughly discussed and thought-provoking subjects. So I do have a mandatory disclaimer that even though I am a licensed occupational therapist, there's a good chance that I am likely not your therapist. So both of these episodes are not meant to diagnose or treat in any way, but we are going to come in and explore some of our mental health-related episodes.
Coming into the number 9 slot, we have No F's Given, where we had a vulnerable discussion on the impact of burnout from collective trauma, compounded stress, being overworked, emotional baggage, and more.
But what gets always pushed off? Leisure. Taking time for yourself and doing leisure-based activities is what always gets set to the side because it doesn't have that immediacy. Oh, I can do that later. I don't need to think about that. That I can do later. But I have this, and this that needs to be done.
Or it's just for me, so it's not as important.
Exactly. So what happens to me with burnout, because my burnout goes with my anxiety. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that have contributed to my burnout are logical in this situation. So when things that contribute to your burnout and your anxiety actually like have a nice rooted seat in logic, it makes it really hard to defute them in your brain because there's enough logic supporting it. What happens is, at least for me, because I also have anxiety, is you start to cycle. And then what always gets me is that in burnout is that lack of control feeling. And so my instinct is to just start dropping things so I can feel like I have some control. Well, if I just drop things and make them go away, that'll make it better. Unfortunately, my current list, none of it can be dropped. It all has to be done. There's no dropping. So that old standby does not work. And so then what happens is it starts to impact my relationships with other people because I can drop those. I can not do a leisure activity. I cannot do these things with other people because that's something I actually have control over, which also is not healthy because I can't not go to work. I can't not do class. I can't not manage some of these other things. They impact other people besides myself. I have to do them. Then you get in the loop with the anxiety and the depression and the burnout, and it just keeps cycling. And honestly, for like the last probably 2 to 3 years, I don't think I've escaped the loop at all. So I'm just always exhausted. Next up on the mental health front is number 8, which is post-con depression. Something we feel like every con-goer can relate to. This was the episode where we tackled the beast known as post-con depression. We took a look at what it is, why it happens, and what you can do to help yourself feel better when you're missing being in that space with your people and you find yourself kind of thinking about the last con. We have also had requests to do post-contest depression, so we will take a look at that and stay tuned for that. But right now we're going to check out a clip from post-con depression. This entire song is a coping mechanism for dealing with what happens when you are not in this environment that makes you feel the most yourself, which I think is a lot of it too, is for a lot of people who attend conventions, they don't feel as connected to the day-to-day world as they do to the people at conventions. And so it's like 3 days where you get to be 100% yourself. And that is really hard to separate from. And I do think that for people who have some of that, this hits harder than others. It also tends to hit your older con population a little bit differently. That community one is probably the big one that hits people the most. Is like, you're in with your people for 3 days, and now you have to go back to the regular world that doesn't get you.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, I get that one, because, like, legit, I'm like, I don't see my friends unless I'm at a con, or we're somehow online together. Like, I don't really have friends where I live. I don't really live in a place that makes that easy. So, and I'm not home pretty much at all during the week, because I'm at work.
Yeah. Well, and I even just looking at kind of what we've gone through the years, like even now, like I have a whole like wardrobe that I only wear at con.
Me too.
And you're not going to find me like taking selfies or, you know, like posing in front of the mirror, really kind of like doing that like once over on myself a whole lot, unless I'm in that environment and at con, just because I think I feel so much more confident. Like I can wear a wig in the color of hair that I wish that I could have, but my job won't let me. I can wear clothes that are fun and, you know, a little bit of spunk because it's perfectly acceptable for me to wear those in those environments, but not necessarily in my day-to-day life, either because it's against the dress code or it's not practical. There's definitely a comfort level of being there. And then if you look at people, especially in marginalized communities or those that are
neurodivergent, where they're going to see other people that are like them, or at least, allies that they're not going to necessarily get everywhere else when they're just walking down the street.
Speaking of relatable, sliding into our top mental health slot and number 7 of our overall countdown is crushing con crunch. Whether you're a planner or not, you've probably been there. Here we took a look at the science behind procrastination and ways to combat this maladaptive habit.
This episode has also led to our most requested and popular live panel programming, Crushing Con Crunch and Neurospicy. So look for more of this content at a con near you in 2025.
This entire episode is just like a giant call out to things that I do in my daily life.
It's for both of us, let's be honest. I'm also a procrastinator. I also have ADHD, so it makes it 10 times worse. So what is con crunch actually? Well, con crunch is ultimately procrastination. And procrastination literally means putting it off until tomorrow. Part of the thing about procrastination is that our brains are actually wired to stay in the present and not go to the future. So we're not actually meant to think as far ahead as what would be useful in general. So whether you're procrastinator or not, your brain really isn't wired to do that. So your short-term needs are going to be prioritized over your long-term need. So then what happens with procrastinating is it is a short-term relief for any anxiety and stress related to that project or event. So by putting it off for a little bit, you get a little bit of relief. Oh, well, I'm going to put it off again. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of relief. Oh, I don't want to face this yet. So I'm going to come up with a reason to put it off. In the short term, you're getting relief from that anxiety and stress response. But in the long term, that response is going to come back at you tenfold because everything's going to kind of run into you at once. But what is important to note is that procrastination is more about emotional regulation than laziness. So procrastinators aren't necessarily lazy, and I think that's a big misconception. We get labeled as lazy, not wanting to do our work, and that's not typically the case.
Well, and I think that that's really important for people to realize, especially people that are procrastinators, is that you're not lazy. It's a lot of people feel shame because of this belief either they have internalized or that other people have, where people who procrastinate are lazy. Like you've explained, that's not what this is. It's not just not wanting to do the thing because you don't want to do the thing.
No, it's more those emotional regulation components, typically in relationship to self-esteem or anxiety, that causes the procrastination cycle. It's not laziness, it's a maladaptive response to managing certain uncomfortable emotions, typically anxiety. So again, it's that short-term, short-lived relief of that uncomfortable emotion that elicits the procrastination behavior. So over the past 5 years, we've had the honor of featuring many voices on this show, aside from our own, whether it be through write-in, presentation collaborations, and special guest episodes and mini episodes.
Starting off the guest episode category in our number 6 slot is an ode to spirits of cosplayers past with Born to Make History. Special guest Laughing Rat Cosplay gave us a glimpse of the origins of cosplay, including when and where cosplay started, how it's evolved, and what the future may hold for our beloved hobby.
In Worldcon 1939, I think it was like July 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And this is kind of the single defining moment when cosplay first happened as we would define it as a convention costuming experience. And it's also the single event that started convention costuming thereafter. Two nerds, Forrest Ackerman, Myrtle, she was Myrtle Jones at the time. She was later Myrtle Douglas, so she's usually referred to as Myrtle Douglas, decided to show up dressed in costumes that were inspired by costumes from a science fiction film from 1936 called Things to Come, which was based on a story by H.G. Wells. But they were made by Myrtle. It was probably Forrest's idea to make them. They were they were known in fandom and are usually referred to this day by their fandom names, Fori and Moroyo. Fori being short for forest, Moroyo being the Esperanto letters for her initials at the time, Mo, Ro, Yo. She was big into Esperanto and languages, so that's where she got that. And also a fun side note, they had fandom just like we do still today. Me going by Laughing Rat, you guys being Lavi, Elle, and Ash. It's just kind of a nifty little fandom quirk tradition
that's
thing
super
that we all put
interesting. When you
together.
said that, I was like, wow, I totally didn't know that.
Yeah, no,
fandom aliases were kind of a thing back in the day.
They were very much a thing. People would publish under aliases in fandom publications. Fandom publications at the time were usually done out of people's homes. They were called zines. Usually pretty small, like pamphlet type deals where people would share their they would share their own short fiction. They would share commentary, movie reviews, book reviews. They would have like letters to the editor. They would have letter sections where you would have like these slow burn months long fandom wars where someone would publish an opinion and then somebody would write back the next month and say, no, you're stupid and you're wrong and I'm going to tell you why. And then you would get the response and just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
So it's the original Twitter.
Original Twitter, yes. Yes. Flame wars like you would not believe.
Easing our way into the top half of our countdown in the number 5 slot is Pain-Free Crafting with special guest Paisley and Glue, who joined me to provide helpful tips for, well, pain-free crafting. We looked at why repetitive tasks cause injury, preventative options, and items you may want around for when crafting literally becomes a pain in the neck. The post for this episode does have links and options for all of the items that we discussed as well.
And I tend to, depending on what I'm doing, go back and forth between sitting and standing. My main thing is that I try to make an effort to establish a good ergonomic position when I start each task. So if I sit, I make sure that, if it's my tall chair, that my footrest thing is like bumped up so that my feet aren't just dangling and is at the proper height so that my shoulders are not going to be hunched up, similar to when you're sitting at a computer, or at a sewing machine. You want to make sure that your elbows can sort of rest casually on the table without sort of being bumped up at an awkward height. That's usually going to be the most stable position for your shoulders and the rest of your joints for a sort of longer period of time if you're going to be sitting or standing. And the same time with a counter height table, different people, depending on what your height is, a different table height is going to be better for you. So I think oftentimes if you're making a craft table, doing something custom to make sure that it's the right height for you is really important. A person that's 5'2" needs a very different table height for comfortable standing than a person who's 6'2". Could I adjust something to make my body more comfortable before I even start and get really involved in this task? And then, 2 hours down the road, realize that I've really sort of made some poor choices that I'm going to regret later.
Topping off our guesting category in the number 4 slot is Where the Points Don't Matter. We were joined by special guest Ginoza Costuming for a 2-part discussion about points in cosplay contests, what they really mean to judges and contestants, and the mythical extra points.
Accuracy for me has kind of been changing recently. It's not just, did you do this exactly the way it looks in the picture? It's I'm okay with interpretation. It seems to be like it should be accuracy or a quality of interpretation, because there are some things that you're going to have to change if you're a size 20 when the character is a size 2. Like, things are going to have to change. And if it's for like a positive reason, like sometimes you'll get points for maybe taking that really, really plain fabric and like jazzing it up a little by using like a like a cool texture or something like that, even though it obviously just called for like a basic cotton. Like things like that can be a positive thing. It doesn't have to just be, I did this exactly the way it looks. I am Sailor Moon.
I am Sailor Moon. It's almost more fidelity to your source material. Like, how are you honoring your source material?
Yes, I would say so.
And I like that.
Yes, I think it's becoming more prevalent, especially since more people are doing original designs, and they can't always be accurate if you don't have a design. I can't tell you how many people who came to the last two costume contests I did who did original designs, and we had an accuracy category, but we judged it on interpretation of design versus accuracy for those.
I mean, I kind of like that it's going that way because I like making changes because they aesthetically please me.
Also, it's more artistic too, which is cool.
So you all have proven time and time again through your stories, your feedback, your episode requests, and a lot more that our competition-based episodes are your absolute favorites. Typically when we combine them with some of our psychosocial aspects of competing and community.
That being said, number 3 of our countdown takes us through the Wayback Machine to season 1. For Our Name is LVC and We're Competitive Cosplayers. We discussed the addiction that is cosplay competitions and why people are willing to run themselves into the ground for their 30 seconds on stage.
Wait, hold on. Before you all walk away, there's something that we also wanted to just bring focus to, which is really important. When it comes to performing on stage, sometimes it takes a lot of extra help in bringing up props, having people hold up little effects and other things. And we couldn't let you all just leave without thanking you guys for stepping up and becoming stage maids and stage maid handlers and helping like 3-4 performances without being asked. So, like, this really embodies cosplay community, like, to step up and help without being asked. That's amazing. So thank you. Thank you so much for being awesome people.
Wholesome content.
And we got a floppy disk.
We did. We got a floppy disk with photos of Zach and Jim on them.
I'll put the photo up on the Instagram. We never did see what the photos look like.
No, we haven't.
We haven't. We should do that sometime.
At some point.
But this is why we compete. Even though it's crazy. Even though it's stressful. Like, what he said on that stage is why we still do this 20 years later.
Yes. I just love, like, the friendships that we have formed. I love the friendships that we have formed in this hobby, this crazy hobby, this stressful hobby that we have. And as I had mentioned previously, Elle and I met doing cosplay competitions, and there are so many other people we would have never met if we hadn't competed against them. That's how we met Larire Cosplay. That's how we met Wigwig Cosplay. There are so many people that we met and have relationships with outside of cosplay because of doing this crazy thing together at the same time.
I feel like at some point we're also going to have to go back and listen to that episode because it might be time for an update.
I think it probably is.
I think it probably is. I feel like we need to go back and listen to that one, and there may be an update on what competing is to us now as opposed to 5 years ago, because wow, has that changed for us.
For sure.
In so many ways, and probably for a lot of other people too, but that episode is coming soon to a podcast near you. Heading straight into both our competition and the overall number 2 slot should be no surprise. It is the Sandbagging episode, where we elaborate on one of the biggest issues within the competition community, including what sandbagging is, what it isn't, and why people may choose to even participate in this behavior in the first place. Y'all had a ton to say about this. You still have a ton to say about this. So much that we actually ended up with a longer follow-up episode. So I would say by far this is the most shared episode on social media. I even spot this frequently mentioned in like competition forums, being recommended to help people understand sandbagging, learn what it really is. And you all will get a little dose of my opinion about recompeting in our 100th episode. So you need a certain amount of ethical blindness in order to participate in sandbagging, or you have to have enough of that feeling that you are entitled to certain compensation for XYZ, and therefore sandbagging is okay.
Well, and I think it's really good to differentiate that there is a difference between written rules and societal norms.
Yes.
So just because something is in poor taste doesn't mean that it's literally against the written rules, but some people might frown on it if it is against their societal expectations of what you should do.
But I also feel like it's kind of linked to our, like, big to-do with social justice. It's not fair. It's against what a community should do. So then people get really upset about it because we have a lot of focus on fairness and equality and those types of things within our community.
Well, and on the flip side of that, I mean, we like to make the argument about, you know, like best in show should be the best thing in the show. And I think that's why some people don't understand why the US is like this, because if it is literally the best thing in the show, it's the best thing in the show, regardless of whether or not it won an award at another con.
And last but certainly not least, to top off our retrospective here in our number 1 slot is Cheater Cheater Pumpkin Eater, what I would consider to be the mother of many of our research-heavy episode, including sandbagging. This episode delved into the science behind why people cheat in cosplay contests, the how and motivation involved, plus a few funny cheating stories we've picked up along the way.
By far, this was I would say, the most involved episode we have ever done. This one took me 2 years of researching, compiling, processing, and assembling to get it the way that I truly wanted it. And I'm hoping that perhaps I will find a little bit more time in 2025 to bring you some additional deep dives. You have to not have a moral compass to participate in this behavior. That's what it comes down to, is if you fully 100% are into this behavior, your moral compass doesn't work, because it means you really don't care about other people. And that's where it's important to note that making ethical decisions relies on a firm understanding and caring about social processes. So if you don't give a shit about social expectations, you're gonna do whatever the hell you want. I mean, that's how it works.
Yeah, for better or worse.
If someone isn't socially competent or they lack a moral compass, they're just gonna do what they want to do that's gonna benefit them the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had clients like this. I have had clients where I have had to teach the benefit for them of paying attention to the needs of other people, because they don't have that intrinsically in themselves. Instead of doing the expected thing because it's the expected thing, you have to teach people with certain disorders how the expected thing benefits them so they are more likely to do it. Because it's very hard to wrap your head around that concept of not caring about other people. Although I think in our current society, we are seeing how that's more common than we probably all thought. Finding that people are far more self-centered than I think we all realized. And why our society is so self-centered has a lot to do with that intense focus on me, as opposed to the whole.
Yes.
And so that's where some of this behavior comes to, is we're kind of brought up with, like, you need to focus on yourself. It's about your success. It's about your needs. It's about your rights. And we don't often look at the whole societal picture. And so that's kind of where some of this process comes from. Because you can't really make ethical decisions when you feel like the social context of your decision is fine. So if your reason to compete is to win, and you don't have any concern about other people, and you don't see any value in playing the game, you're not going to have any ethical issue with cheating, because you're just doing what you need to do towards your goal, which is to win.
All right, friends, that takes us down that trip down memory lane we were talking about. Let us know on the Instagram post, in the comments, DMs, what you think. If there's any follow-ups you'd like to see to any of these topics. And if we missed your favorite episode, let us know what it was.
If you have any suggestions for additional topics, or you feel you know someone who might make a good guest speaker for our podcast, please let us know either through DMs or our email at podcastscs@gmail.com.
All right. Happy New Year, you guys, and we will see you in 2 weeks for the next episode. I'm Ash.
I'm Elle.
We are Lavi Cosplay.
And this is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say. You've been listening to Shenanigans Cosplayers Say, produced by LVC Productions. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at Lavi Cosplay. Our podcast Instagram is Podcast SCS. Our website is lavicosplay.com. Have a fun, crazy con or cosplay-related story, absurd cosplay question, or just something in general to share with us? Email us at podcastscs@gmail.com or DM us at podcastscs or Lavi Cosplay on Instagram. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should.